Alright guys, we got another Buddy Fight deck profile for you. Today it is my updated Skull Warrior Katana World build with my buddy Evelyn Heart Yami-Gitsune. Yes, that is the Buddy Rare variant from the Golden Pack. It was actually the first card I pulled from my first pack. Heck of that set, it was amazing. Anyway, let's get this started. For our size 1s, we have 4 Evelyn Heart Yami-Gitsune. For those of you who don't know about him, his call cost is pay 1 gauge, and then anytime another Skull Warrior on your field inflicts a damage to your opponent, you may choose to retire it and draw a card. Which works out well with a lot of the cards that are Skull Warriors, seeing as they nuke themselves. Next up is 4 Bloody Knife Kimensei. A smaller grade, smaller size one, but overall worth it from the deck. Since he has Penetrate and a critical of 2. He's good in conjunction with Evelyn Heart Yami-Gitsune, since you can pull off his skill and add more cards to your hand. Now one of the newer cards I've actually been liking is this one, Demon Kid Himura. Whenever he's called from the drop zone, you can put the top card of your deck into your gauge, which is pretty awesome in using it with Return to the Underworld, which costs you a gauge to call a card, so call him, get a gauge for calling him, so you don't minus yourself as much. That's going to do it for our size 1s. Next up, our size 2s. I run 2 Blade Tiger Gorinbu. He's one of the few Skull Warriors who doesn't nuke himself. Also, with a power of 6,000 and crit of 3, you can pretty much use him to bulldoze over most cards your opponent's going to have on the field. I also have 3 Almighty Dokusai. For those of you who don't watch the show, he's a size 2 with 7,000 power, a critical of 2, and Penetrate. But, like most of the cards in the deck, he nukes himself at the end of the turn, killing himself. And then I have 3 Tempest Garou, who as long as you don't use his ability to give him double attack and extra power, he won't kill himself, which is a good deal. But you pretty much run him purposely to do his ability for field clearing. Alright. Now for our size 3s. Now this one I've been trying out, so I'm not sure how I feel about him. I like to use him really to go into my gauge more than anything. I have 4 100 Demons General Gojiniryu. Namely because since he can be called from the drop zone by killing either a 100 Demons card on your field or a Skull Warrior, and paying his call cost, he becomes a great addition, especially with 10,000 power. We're in 5,000 defense. It makes him a bastard to kind of deal with defending against or trying to counter. And with double attack, he's pretty much clearing your opponent's field every time he swings. And even if they kill him on the off chance, you can bring him back next turn as long as you have the conditions for it. Right, on to our spells. My spells are mostly focused on trying to defend cards like Yami-Gitsune and the 100 Demons General. Kind of like my key cards to the deck. So we have 4 Art of Body Replacement, 3 Shooting Cross Knives Right Hand, which will nullify the attack and wipe my opponent's field if they attack a monster on my right. We also have Spinning Windmill Knives Backhand, which is essentially the same card, but it protects a monster on my left. I have 4 Demon Way Oboru Genbu. It's essentially an Art of Body Replacement, except you can't have a monster in your center. So, just gotta learn to roll with the punches on that one. Next up, much like most decks in the game, you run a Gauge Ramp card, so I run 3 Clear Serenity. Oddly enough, I see it pretty often. Every now and again I see it in my gauge instead of actually coming to my hand. We have 2 Return to the Underworld, which is pay a gauge and call a size 1 or less, which is great, but after seeing Odd Ritual Skull Festival from one of the newer sets, pay a life and I can call a size 2 or less without paying its call cost. So it's a great way to get your Yami Gitsune back, your Bloody Knife Kimensei, your whatever. But both of those set cards can only be used each once per turn. So it's not completely broken if you just get one of them. Ideally, in my experience, you want 2 of them on the field. At least one of each if you can. If not, ideally you want 1 Odd Ritual Skull Festival, because that 1 life, at the end of the day, is not a problem unless you've just been getting wailed on, or were unfortunate enough to go against Raging Spirits, which will just kill you. Alright, going on to our weapons. I actually like this one, the Great Fiend Sword Yamigatsama. Power of 6,000 and a critical of 4. The equip cost is to pay 1 gauge, which is just perfect for it. However, whenever it attacks, it does deal you a point of damage, which is a pretty mean trade-off, but for a critical of 4 and a card that doesn't just pop, it's not that bad. I personally like it. It's saved my butt quite a few times so far. It actually, in one game, I pulled off an OTK, which I'll explain a little bit later. Alright, for our impacts, I have 4 Lethal Formation. I have a Secret Sword Star Crusher for spell counter. I have a Secret Sword Moonfang for impact counter. I have a Secret Sword Morningstar for creatures with 3,000 or less power that attack. And then I have Secret Sword Comet, it for creatures with 5,000 or more. Now, the reason I choose these is these are the most likely suspects your opponents are going to pick. But we're going to get into my sideboard in a little bit, and I'm going to show you what I've kind of put in there, or and how I see the flow of my deck going. But that's that. Alright, for our sideboard, I run 3 Demon Way Gepugiri. Namely because Gepugiri will just nuke a card the moment they destroy one of my cards. So, attack my card, destroy their monster that's still standing, so I lower their attacks. Then I have Outlander Byakuryou. When he hits the field, he can destroy a size 2 or less on the field. His call cost is nothing, which is great. I keep 1 Blade Tiger Garinbu, namely just to kind of have it there. I've every now and again put it into the deck, but not very often. Next up, I have a Secret Sword Shooting Star, which counters a weapon attack by my opponent. What I've noticed a lot with most modern decks that I've seen is there's not a lot of weapon attack except for in select decks. And even then, it depends if they get their weapon. But if I notice they have a way to dig it out faster, I tend to sideboard in Shooting Star. Then I also have Secret Sword, or the Glittering Star, which counters link attacks. Most decks I run, I don't really link attack much, except for really Death Rulers. But with this card, if you have to link attack anything in my deck, you're pretty much asking to get hit by that impact. Most things in Skull Warriors nuke themselves, or they're so weak you could run over them with a creature with 1,000 power. So it's not really relevant to have it main decked all the time. But a few strategies I've come up with for OTKs and other strategies from the deck, especially late game, depending on when you get it. Although you can also implement this early game. Just let me get it together. You're going to want to have your Evil and Heart either in your left or right position. It doesn't matter. As long as he's on the field, you're okay. Alright, let's just adjust the camera here just so show you. I'm pretty sure I explained this in my previous video, because it's a strategy I tried to carry over. You ideally want 2 Bloody Knife Kimense. If not, if you have Hinamura, put him over there versus on your center. Because since he's going to nuke himself at the end of the turn, there's no point in really having him anywhere else. You're going to want to have your weapon equipped, ideally, because hopefully you're going to be able to use it, unless your opponent can nullify. You would have already wanted to cast Clear Serenity, so assume right now you're pretty much somewhere in the realm of 4 or so gauge. So enough to cast your impact, because you want to ideally have your impact in hand. Now, this is not going to OTK them if you get Hinamori versus Kimense. Ideally, you want it to be 2 Kimense, 1 in your center, or your right or your left. You just need to keep one Kimense and your Yami-Gitsune in your left or right position. But if you get Hinamura, it's not that bad because he'll kill himself and go to the drop zone anyway. But on what you're going to do, if your opponent has something in their center, you're going to link attack. They're both going to deal their penetrate over. You'll kill both of them with Yami-Gitsune's skill to draw 2 cards. Hopefully it's cards that you can use, but it screws you over sometimes. You'll attack in with this. And this is probably the card they're going to nullify, so don't really worry about it, because you still would have dealt them 6 points of damage. So you'll attack with that. Even if they nullify it, you can then final phase. Because you can leave the monsters on their left and right alone. You'd set your lethal formation, then depending what their field looks like, you'd pick your impact. If you notice that they were casting a lot of spells, those you're going to go Star Crusher. If you realize, hey, they're gearing up for an impact, but if you're doing this early game, impact's the least likely. If you notice they have monsters on the field, are they 3,000 or less, 5,000 or more? I mean, like, anyone who runs Katana World should really understand the basics of using lethal formation effectively. Because it's not all that hard. And I've pulled off this a few different times. I've never really truly one-turn killed anyone unless they notice what I'm doing. Because it lines you up perfectly for it. But, I mean, like, that's pretty much the strategy. You have that one. But I'm still trying to figure out things with the size 3. Since it's still kind of new, I'm feeling it out, testing it out. And I'll let you guys know when I find out more information and more of my own personal thoughts and strategies with it. But right now, that's the deck in a nutshell. It's been doing well. It's hard for people to counter. Despite me having my center open most times, and the number of counter spells and protection spells in this deck make it easy for you to defend yourself. So it's not hard to say that, I can survive with my center open for a few turns. Just like any deck, you can't leave it open obsessively, but you get the idea. But as always, guys, that's the deck. So comment down below your own opinions, or if you love the idea, let me know that you loved it. If you tried it out and it didn't work for you, and you want some more help from me, feel free to ask. But I'll catch you guys later. So remember, please like, subscribe, even tell your friends.